For the slight delay there. My name is Dave Olson. I am the chairman of the Genesee County Libertarian Party. I'd like to welcome everyone to beautiful Genesee County on such a great spring day. I'm glad you could come out. A great turnout. Thank you all so very, very much. I just want to point out a couple quick housekeeping things. If there's ever the unlikely event of some kind of an incident, there are exits here and then out the way you came also. There are emergency lights that'll light up and all that stuff. If anyone needs any assistance or help, please make it known so we can help you, and we want everybody to be safe. Restrooms, if you'll go out that door there, straight down that hall, the men's and the ladies' rooms are on the left side. If anyone has any kind of special needs or they need anything, any help or any assistance, anything at all, please let us know, and we'll be glad to help you. There's refreshments over there. We've got water, soda, cookies and chips. Please help yourself. They're all complimentary. There's also coffee out in the lobby and hot water and tea bags. So please, again, help yourself. Refreshments are compliments of the Genesee County, the members of the Genesee County Libertarian Party. I got two people over there with me. They're on us, so enjoy. Dr. Mark Legowski is here. He is the New York State Libertarian Party chairman. So during the breaks, if you want to know more about the Libertarian Party, come on over and ask us. We'll be glad to tell you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce one of the key organizers and supporters and set this event up. She's a member of the Erie County Libertarian Party, is a contributor to many nationally read libertarian blogs and sites. She's worked on numerous campaigns, including Gary Johnson, the Taniqua Simmons for Buffalo mayor, and now the Larry Sharp New York governor campaign. She works a full-time job plus a part-time Lyft driver, does all those other things, and is mom to a 4-year-old. So she's a very busy lady. Ladies and gentlemen, Elise Aumann. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, my job here is done. As he said, my name is Elise Aumann. I am coming today on behalf of the Erie County Libertarian Party and the Larry Sharp for New York. He's running for governor in 2018. So he's a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and this is important to him as well. So that's two things I'm involved with that I wanted to mention to you today. We put together this town hall because, as a lot of you know, Second Amendment rights have been something that have been under fire from a lot of different groups recently in the news, you know, in the last few years, but most especially lately, after all of the horrible school shootings, it has become a target of groups for their own agendas. And so we thought it was really important to get together to talk about keeping our Second Amendment rights and explaining to people why those rights are important. The older generation, you know that, sometimes there is a gap in between the older and younger generation and understanding the value behind what the country was founded on and the rights that were given to us as citizens. So I just wanted to mention that is why we felt it was really important to get together to talk about this today. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dave Mangiello. He is the owner of Mangiello's Auto Repair and Parts. He's come from Lockport, ran for office a few times himself. Fantastic guy to work with. I just met him doing this, but Dave, if you want to come on up here and speak.
Thanks, Elise. Thanks for all your hard work. Hi, everyone. I, like so many others, wasn't involved until I became a victim. And some of you guys might have heard of my story. I was basically sentenced to jail for 10 days because I put fundraising on my sign in front of my business. Yes, it was fundraising, advertising fundraising events so people can help pay their medical bills. But that led me on a path. Plus other things that happened in my life. I was a victim of the family court system early on, along with my sisters. And with trying to run my business, things that have happened throughout the years of just trying to be a good human being and trying to survive through the years, always seems like the government always wanted something. They wanted something. And when this happened with my signer deal, I just couldn't believe it. It just blew me away that our judicial system has become what it is, or even what our government is. So that led me on a path. I'm an auto mechanic into computer diagnostics. I like analyzing things and really digging down into the grassroots, what causes certain things. And the first thing I looked in was the legal system. And to come to find out that it really doesn't represent anything what our forefathers have put in place. Nothing at all. And so what has happened? What has happened is virtually 100 years of indoctrination, 100 years of going on a path totally different than what our forefathers put in place. And it's nothing new. It's really, as early as 10, 15 years after the Constitution, there was laws that were unconstitutional. Some have said I'm too radical, but in my opinion, that's my opinion, that there's things out there, and these things they gave us really need to be taught. And one of the things I found out is jury nullification, because a lot of people don't understand the term. Who has heard about it, who knows what it means out here? So about 25, 30%. So jury nullification means that we get to judge the law, and that is the most important concept of what America is. This is a statement from Thomas Jefferson. I consider trial by jury as the only anchor ever yet imagined by a man by which the government can be held to the principles of its Constitution. There's an organization out there called FIJA, Fully Informed Jury Association. They got brochures online. Here's just one of the small things in the brochure. Government teachers won't teach you this in school, but a jury has more authority than Congress, the President, or even the Supreme Court. Judges say the law is for them to decide. That's not true. When you are a juror, you have the right to decide both the law and the fact. American jurors have a proud tradition of saying no and not guilty when a bad or corrupt law are used against the people. You can protect yourself and friends and family by refusing to enforce bad laws in our system of checks and balances. You, the juror, are the final judge of law and justice. So what has happened through the years, because it's bad enough we're ignorant, we don't know this process exists, but the court system and the procedure laws that the bureaucrats have put in place, they don't want even the courtroom or the jury to even know that jury nullification exists, to the point where if you're ever questioned for jury duty, you will be asked, what do you know? And if you say you know anything about nullification, you're kicked right out, which is totally unconstitutional, but it's so out of control now, that's what's going on. And not only the jury, we've looked into the grand jury and found out the grand jury actually has authority that I never knew existed. So back in 1930, the grand jury in downstate New York fired their own attorney, fired their own district attorney, hired one they trusted. I don't know if you ever heard about Tammany Hall and all the corruption in downstate New York. That's how it was stopped. The grand jury is not part of the government body. And there's Anton Scalia had a decision in 1992 called U.S. versus Williams. He said in that decision that being the grand jury is only mentioned in the Bill of Rights, it's only in the hands of the people, serving as a buffer between the people and the government. So the grand jury always had the authority to investigate merely of a suspicion of a wrong to assure that nothing wrong is going on. So, and I've heard stories from people that were on the grand jury, and the government kind of feeds you little things. Yeah, you can do what you want, but you got to follow the law. You got to follow the law. Someone called my garage the other day and said, Dave, the Narragansett County District Attorney's on the radio. Why don't you call and ask her some questions? So I did. And her name was Carolyn Watazik, and I said, Carolyn, I found something really interesting. What is that? I said, I found in California that every county in California has a statutory complaint form where the citizens can file a direct complaint to the grand jury to investigate bad government. Then I found out that U.S. versus Williams, and I found out that the grand jury is the true protector of the people. It's not electing people, the grand jury is. And even says right in the Declaration of Independence that that we have a right to abolish what's abusive to us. And that's why the grand jury is only mentioned in the Bill of Rights. It's not in any body of the Constitution whatsoever. It's only in the Bill of Rights. And many people say it's the fourth branch of the government, only in our hands to protect the government. She goes, yeah, Dave, you're correct. I said, but the grand jury's got to use the law. The grand jury, has to use these procedures of the law and everything else. I said, well, you're making a good point there. When you say law, I says, are you talking about natural law that's mentioned in the Declaration of Independence? Are you talking about the common law that's mentioned in the Bill of Rights? That means law that existed prior to the writing of our Constitution? Click, they hung up the phone on me. Because that's it. Our law of America is natural law. It's mentioned right in our Declaration of Independence. It says natural law and law of God. And if you search topics like Judge Napolitano, natural law at the Mises Institute, there's a great presentation he teaches about the elements of natural law, what it's about, and how we judge our law from our hearts. It's simply good versus evil. It's not statute, codes, and rules that bureaucrats made up. So the most powerful aspect we have as human beings is to use our heart to judge the law and the facts and to educate others on that, and educate others of the power of the grand jury. If you know anybody on the grand jury, they have the power to fix everything in government. But we don't know that. And that's why we're led this illusion that electing people fixes government. How do you like that? We think that government fixes itself. It's ridiculous. But yet we keep on doing the same old, same old. It's that typical indoctrination, I guess, in the media and the press. We're so key to worry about what Trump is doing and Trump this and Trump that, but yet most of us don't even know who our town supervisors are, our elected officials, our committee men, our grassroots officials that affect who is up higher in government. So I just ask you to learn about it. If you got any questions, my business cards are in the back table there. Shoot me an email. You got any questions, we'll be around for questions and answers on this. I got a few brochures, but not too many on the jury nullification. And the next speaker up here is Jim Ostrowski. I met Jim back in the days of running for committee men. Everybody hear the committee man? What that is before? Did you ever hear that? A precinct captain, that positions at all? Nobody? So the precinct captain or the committee man is a local elected position that's being hidden from you. So whatever political party you belong to, there's a representative that lives within 5 blocks of your house that links you to your political party. Yet we don't know that exists, and they purposely don't want us to know that. So I get involved with doing presentations, getting grassroots people involved in this process to come to find out that the political parties have manipulated. We got elected as committee members. It's very easy. You walk around a neighborhood, get 10 signatures, you're elected as a county representative in your party. You go to a county meeting by law, and you decide who runs for every single elected office, including the president. So when you hear this term, this is the endorsed candidate, that comes from the person that lives within 5 blocks of your house, but you don't know he's even there. So we found out politicians are getting in it. We found out family members of politicians, people that contribute their campaigns. So that's how it's being abused at a grassroots level that we don't even know. They're there. And your local politicians are to blame for what's going on here, like you wouldn't believe. But Jim Ostrowski, I met him going through the process along with the Tea Party. And Jim is an attorney, more of a libertarian, more of a liberty type attorney. He believes in fighting for our rights. And Jim has been one of the very few attorneys that gets very emotionally involved and feels for his clients and will defend people for, in my opinion, something that is, most attorneys that would charge you $20,000 for, Jim would do it for maybe $500 half the time. But here's Jim Ostrowski. And thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Can everybody hear me out there? I think I have the equipment working. Thanks, everybody, for coming on this wonderful global cooling day. And I was getting dressed today, and I grabbed a tie that's special to me because it was my father's tie. And it's funny, Dave's an auto mechanic, and we didn't give him a speaking role just because he paid for the room, although he did pay for the room. he's actually a very brilliant, self-taught citizen. And my father had the privilege of going to Georgetown Law School and has another advanced law degree. But my father and Dave have something in common, actually. They both thought the grand jury should be an independent body, because many years ago, when my father got on the Supreme Court in Buffalo, which includes this district, the 8 counties, he said, you know, the grand jury is supposed to be a part of the court. For years, for decades, it had been in the district attorney's office behind locked doors, under the thumb of the DA. So my father, he's a pretty courageous guy. He fought the Nazis in street fighting. He said, we're going to impanel this in my courtroom, and that way the grand jury could have its own control. And the powers that be said no. So we're still fighting that battle today, and Dave and my father have that and other things in common. I'm self-employed. I don't owe any political favors. I've never gotten any. So I'm not, like I have said before, I'm not running for office. I'm running from office. So I'm going to say what I really think. And some of the people in this room may disagree with some of the things I have to say. But I think that this is a time for truth. There's so much dishonesty and deception in politics, and just the words that we use are dishonest. So you're going to get what I think is the truth today. We are losing the fight for the Second Amendment. We are losing it in the courts, we're losing it in the legislatures, we're losing it in the media, in the schools, and with young people. The approach we've been using to protect the Second Amendment for many years is failing and will continue to fail. That approach is basically focused on lobbying, elections, voting, and litigation without any serious attempt to change the philosophical or ideological bent of the country to the left, which has been accelerating, particularly in the last 5 years, and without any attempt to change the basic progressive mindset that has dominated American politics for many decades. The tactics we have used are archaic, dated, spent, don't work, and there's been no attempt to use bold, innovative tactics, and unless that changes, we are going to lose this fight. We are close to losing a right that has been recognized in the West for many centuries. It's an ancient right that great minds had to first do the philosophical work to identify, then define, then do the hard political work to have this right recognized by governments and by government law. We are on the verge of losing this ancient right in these times and perhaps very soon because of our own failure to properly defend it with good arguments and good strategy and tactics and the efficient execution of those strategies and tactics. This is a bad time to be disarmed. Excuse me. Progressive big government is on the rise, regardless of which party is in power. And here I go. The GOP loves big government. They just love it. That's what I'm talking about. You're going to hear the truth today. The government grows constantly, creating numerous problems that generate endless social conflict and unrest. Will the government protect you when riots break out? The left is resurgent. Excuse me, can I have water? Sorry, forgot to bring my water up. You've seen it on TV and in the news. The left is resurgent and more radical than ever. They are not deterred by the fact, excuse me, that every leftist regime that ever got power inflicted through state gun violence, that's government gun violence, widespread misery, poverty, and strife. The driving force of leftism is not reason, but anger, envy, and hatred. The left could gain power any time by winning an election. Does anyone want to be disarmed while the lunatic left builds a de facto one-party state that will inevitably move towards the creation of a totalitarian state? So we do need some new strategic and tactical ideas, and we're going to hear from you after my presentation as well. So first of all, we need to recognize that gun control is a progressive idea. What is progressivism? If we don't understand what progressivism is, how can you fight gun control? Because it's a progressive idea. Progressivism has been the dominant mindset for many decades. So if we don't understand exactly what it is, we're helpless to respond to progressive policy proposals such as gun control. In a nutshell, progressivism is the notion that there's a governmental solution to every human problem that can be executed without cost or harmful consequences. That's the ruling ideology of this country for the last 100 years. Doesn't matter which party's in power. Have you noticed that when the Republican Party's in power, nothing changes? That's because of the progressive mindset that dominates both parties. So underlying the underlying assumption after school shootings is there's got It's not going to happen because it's impossible. Notice how the absurd assumption of the progressive shapes the debate over school safety. If we propose anything to make schools safer, they're always going to say, you have an absolutely guarantee that there will never be a school shooting ever. That's silly. We're not going to go with your idea. So progressivism is not a rational political philosophy. It's an irrational form of therapy, for want of a better word, whereby the progressive makes himself feel better by proposing some government action he thinks, without any evidence or logic, will solve the problem. The progressive believes state gun violence, or the threat of it, will improve society. This always fails because it is absurd. Yet, the progressive can never admit failure because he needs this progressive fantasy to cope with life. Hence, the progressive is in an endless search for scapegoats to blame for the failures of his own policies. Guns are a useful scapegoat for many failed progressive policies, including school shootings, terrorism caused by endless meddling in other countries, street crime, the failed war on drugs, and even suicide. Inert pieces of metal called guns are the cause of all these problems and need to be confiscated, and then all will be well. So more laws are passed, the power of the government increases. No effort is actually made to solve any of these problems by identifying their root causes. So things get worse, and the crazy cycle of endless government growth continues. Also, the progressive knows without any investigation the solution to all human problems: government action. And they show no interest in doing a proper investigation of the real causes of mass shootings. Yet, without such an investigation, such shootings are more likely to continue. One commentator, Brad Wilcox, has noted how often mass shooters grew up without a father in the home. If true, that fact might point the way to possible solutions that might make mass shootings more likely. The progressive, judging from recent events blaming the NRA and private gun owners, shows no interest in a scientific investigation of the facts, and thus, since they have dominated the debate, they make it more likely that mass shootings will continue. Now, trying to get to the root cause of social problems is hard work, takes time, but the progressive craves an instant, perfect solution, and they're not interested. They want therapy. They want to feel good now, damn it. They do not want to do the hard work of understanding the harsh and complex truth of the human condition. I could say a lot more about progressivism, but time is short. If we don't understand and dissect clinically progressivism, we will not be able to respond to gun control arguments. Second, the anti-gun left controls virtually all idea-disseminating institutions in society. They include K-12 schools, the media, college, Hollywood, the large social media companies. The non-left has some talk radio, some podcasts, and the school of hard knocks. With this monopoly, the anti-Second Amendment propaganda sweeps through society very quickly. Because the schools are propaganda mills, we have lost young people. If we don't get them back, we are toast. One way to get them back is to support, and here I go again, is to support their own natural right to escape from these pre-digital age daytime youth detention and propaganda centers backed by the use of government guns of state truant officers. We need to steal the left's old slogan from the 1960s and announce a jailbreak from the government schools. The students are right. Who wants to be forced at gunpoint to be in a dangerous place filled with other students who hate being there and sometimes go postal while the government provides zero protection? The state kidnaps your kids, bullies them, turns them into bullies of the weaker, gives them dangerous psychotropic drugs, then leaves the students defenseless. And it's the fault of the shotgun locked in your safe at home? That's crazy. Let's be blunt. K through 12 schools are largely run by members of the teachers' unions that give 90% of their political donations to the Democratic Party. They teach the children you send there, and you wonder why kids are pro-gun control? Take a look in the mirror. I've been saying this for 20 years. Pull your kids out of these places before it's too late. But in the meantime, it's obvious that kids are taught nothing or worse about the Second Amendment in school. We need to draft and get to every high school in the nation a proposed Second Amendment curriculum. Call a press conference and walk in the place and insist that kids be taught about the Bill of Rights. What a radical proposal, but I assure you, all hell will break loose because the left does not like an open debate over ideas. They prefer a rigged game like they have now. Third, the left controls the terms of the debate so that the issue has been framed in such a way that we automatically lose. The true purposes of the Second Amendment are ignored or obfuscated, and smokescreens and red herrings degrade the debate. If the purpose of the right to bear arms is to allow people to defend themselves against random street crime, then the way progressives think, that must be weighed against the risk of bad guys getting guns, guns being lost or stolen, accidental gun discharges, and suicides. In the utopian mindset of the progressive, the solution is always more gun control because progressivism has no limiting principle. But what if the real purposes of the Second Amendment were understood? The debate would change significantly. As I've explained in detail in my federal court filings, the amendment has twin purposes. In the American system, the people are sovereign and have the ultimate right to rule and the right to retake that delegation of power when government abuses its powers. This is all basic stuff that really can't be denied. Remember the Declaration of Independence? The British gun control mission at Lexington and Concord? Ever hear of the 4th of July and fireworks? If that is purpose number one, which kids are never taught, what exactly is the counter-argument? How about, we have elections now, revolutions are no longer needed. Here's a quick rebuttal. What if, as has happened many times in recent history, they cancel the elections? King George suspended the state legislatures, essentially canceling elections. Gun confiscation is sovereignty confiscation, reversing 250 years of understanding who the bosses are and who the servants are. Confiscation makes us the slaves of any 7 days in May type general who wants to stage a banana republic coup d'etat so he can act like Dr. Strangelove and nuke Russia. The second reason for the Second Amendment is a bit shocking, as no one ever talks about it in left-wing controlled institutions. To prevent the government from engaging in atrocities against its own citizens. Our first reaction, as naive Americans ignorant of history, is this: that's crazy, that can't happen here. Of course it can't. We are armed. The Second Amendment works. Since 1776, there is no instance of the mass slaughter by the government of American citizen civilians. It works. We have been spared what we have seen in many other countries throughout history, the killing of many thousands of people by the state. So it only seems odd to say that the American government has not engaged in mass murder because the Second Amendment has worked. Now, who wants to do an experiment in an era when the left is on the rise and could capture power at any time to surrender all our guns to the state? Don't judge the left by how they act when they're out of power, a bit crazy to be sure, but not an indication of how the left acts when they have absolute power. For that, we need to know some history. According to R.J. Rummel, the left killed 60 million people in the Soviet Union, 35 million people in China, 2 million in Cambodia, millions more in Vietnam, North Korea, and Yugoslavia. To say this kind of thing can never happen here is naive, ignores all of human history, and is really kind of a subtle form of racism. Every race we know of has committed mass atrocities at one time or another. So the American government, the only one to ever drop nuclear bombs on women and children and lie about it, is most definitely not immune. Just ask the poor victims of that other famous gun control mission at Wounded Creek, South Dakota in 1890. Americans, and here I go again, daily worship at the shrine of a secular saint, St. Abraham, who ordered the mass execution of previously disarmed Dakota Indians on December 26, 1862. Now, you could argue that these atrocities all happen in modern times and the framers could not have had this purpose in mind when they adopted the Second Amendment. And that is not true. You probably didn't learn this in government school, but Rummel's research shows that the whole history of the human race is riddled with episodes of maniacal, insane democide, mass murder by states, governments, kingdoms, and other political entities. The framers were well read in this history and were well aware of this sad history of how power is continually abused. Tyrannical governments throughout history have committed atrocities against their subjects. The Second Amendment protects against this prospect. It works. The Second Amendment is like a life insurance policy you hope you never need. Now, why does the left so desperately want, for no good reason, to try an experiment and see what happens if the entire civilian population is disarmed? All history, common sense, logic, and evidence argues against this dangerous experiment. And who will guarantee that once the fanatical left confiscates our guns, that the resulting tyrannical state will not act like all the other ones in history? And how exactly will that guarantee be enforced? With a leftist single-payer life insurance policy? Keep in mind, the progressive is motivated by fear of his own shadow, but the leftist is motivated by anger and hatred of you. The progressive will bore you to death and work you to death with taxes, inflation, and regulations. But beware of the anger and hatred of the leftist. Too often in history, hatred combined with power has produced crimes against humanity. Let me talk about the courts. We're losing in the courts, and we need to understand why and what to do about it. By and large, judges are not on our side. Most are natural progressives. Law schools were long ago captured by the progressive left. Since the Supreme Court has not taken a gun case since McDonald, the lower court judges think they can ignore the Second Amendment with impunity. They have absolutely no fear of trashing the Second Amendment. They think, what are you going to do about it? Well, what are you going to do about it? The Constitution allows us to speak freely and petition the government for a redress of grievances. All lawful and peaceful options for waking judges out of their constitutional slumber need to be on the table, including picketing courthouses and impeaching state and federal judges who, in spite of their oath of office, ignore the clear wording of the Second Amendment. Judges have made themselves immune from lawsuits, but they are not immune from criticism. This isn't Stalin's Soviet Union yet. We need to, as Dave mentioned, we need to understand the role that juries play in enforcing gun laws. Judges have wrongfully destroyed the original Sixth Amendment powers of trial juries to judge both the law and the fact. I have always wondered what would happen if a juror stood up and asked the trial judge, where did you get the authority to change the founders' clear vision of a trial jury as a check on the power of government and the power of the judge? Who will have the courage to do so? But let's talk about grand juries. Here's where the real potential lies. Once you're indicted and charged with a crime, you're behind the eight ball. In violation of the Sixth Amendment, trial juries are bullied into following the judge's instructions about silly and unjust laws. The accused will usually plead guilty to avoid going into debt paying for a good defense lawyer. No, the time to stop the gun monopolists is before indictment at the grand jury. Here's the dirty little secret that none of the DAs and judges want you to know. The grand jury in New York, in the New York state system, does not have to indict even if there is sufficient evidence of an imaginary gun crime. Did you learn that in government school? No, then it's time to take the government to school. Seventh, and here I go again, we need to make new alliances. Politics is about coalitions. Who are our allies? The fact that I have to ask makes the point. We appear to have no allies except the gutless GOP, which will sell you down the river in a heartbeat to win an election. The strongest allies we have are the libertarians who believe the right to bear arms is a natural right. You don't have to agree with them on everything to work with them on this issue. Notice that they have made some progress rolling back the war on drugs while the gun people are in retreat on the war on guns. Guns and drugs. Two types of private property Americans had the right to possess until the progressives came along. Then guns became yet another progressive scapegoat for the failure of the war on drugs and the senseless and endless violence it unleashed. I strongly suggest that the gun people wake up and realize that guns and drugs are essentially the same issue, private property, and none of the government's damn business. The day both movements join forces is the day both will win. And why isn't the Me Too movement an ally of ours? Guns are the great equalizer that women needed throughout history to protect themselves against assault. The government gun monopolists want disarmed women to call 911 after they've been attacked so they can describe the crime to a crime historian. I have heard such a 911 call myself. It's chilling. Women are our natural allies, as are the elderly, the disabled, and the working poor who live in high crime areas and need protection against street crime and burglaries. Finally, Native Americans are potential allies for the reasons I've already made clear, as is anyone whose ancestors were slaves. Why don't we reach out to them? Their ancestors were deprived of the right to bear arms as a condition of being slaves. It's a tragedy we have not reached out to these tens of millions of potential allies. Eighth, we must be prepared to engage in lawful resistance to tyranny if that becomes necessary. We have seen that when totalitarian regimes start knocking on doors in the middle of the night to drag you off to a concentration camp, it's too late to resist. As with the American Revolution, a decision that there will be active resistance has to be made well before things get desperate and hopeless. I have elsewhere listed the various signposts of a tyranny that will warn us of worse things to come. Mass arrests without probable cause, any crackdown on free speech or the press, martial law, prohibition of private schools or homeschooling, house-to-house searches or routine checkpoints, and of course, the mass confiscation of firearms in violation of the Second Amendment. When these unconstitutional moves are made, the government is telling you it will no longer follow the law, and you will know what to do. But finally, if we wake up and understand the nature of what we are up against and start to employ better strategies, we won't face that situation the founders faced in 1775. We need to reframe the issues, identify the adversary and his failed ideologies, and how he uses guns and gun owners as scapegoats for his own failed policies. We need to turn the tables and take the initiative and make the other side play defense for a change. I predict they won't be any good at it. We need to expose the progressive gun monopolists for what they are, people whose policies always fail, but who refuse to take responsibility for those failures, but instead are in an endless search for scapegoats, such as guns and gun owners. It's that simple. We need to expose the leftist government gun monopolists for what they are, power-hungry but confused. They have been telling us for the last 4 years that the police are the bad guys, who shoot unarmed black men because they are racists. Now, they tell us that the police are the good guys who are going to use their guns to take ours away. They tell us that the militias in the South were used primarily to keep the slaves under control, but neglect to point out that throughout history, the inability to own weapons for protection has been the hallmark of slavery. For years, the left complained, except when Obama was president, about all the illegal wars that the federal government fought and all the atrocities the federal government committed in those wars. But now the left wants that very same military-industrial complex to have all the guns. We need to expose the government gun monopolists for what they are. They don't hate guns, and they don't hate gun violence. They love guns. And they love government gun violence, as that is their solution to every human problem. They love guns so much, they want to be the only ones who have any. Again, a left progressive is a person who has this fantastic dream of creating heaven on earth by threatening people with government guns if they don't comply with their own utopian schemes. The difference between the left progressives and us is they want to use guns aggressively to make peaceful people do things they don't want to do. We wish to use them only defensively to stop government from turning into a police state or engaging in mass murder. The gun controllers are not against gun violence. Rather, they wish that all the guns be controlled by an organization that has the most powerful weapons and guns in human history. They trust that this organization would use its power justly and lawfully. Yet, at this very moment, that organization, the federal government of the United States, is waging an illegal and destructive war in Yemen, of all places, a country most Americans could not spot on a map of the world. And in that illegal war, they are aligned with the most repressive regime on earth, Saudi Arabia. In recent decades, presidents of both parties have illegally invaded or intervened in several countries, including Iraq, Libya, and Syria, causing mass destruction, bloodshed, and continuing chaos. Can we really rely on these gentle souls to whom the political left wants to bestow their right to bear our arms, not to turn all that firepower on us in times of civil unrest and whenever they feel it's necessary to preserve the left's highest worldly value, power? You might say that just because the feds have invaded and caused mass destruction and death in many foreign lands does not mean they would ever do so in the homeland. It is true that so far the feds only wage war against strangers in distant lands, but I submit that as this country grows and the diversity of its population increases, and the federal government and its armed agents get more and more distant and more dissimilar to us, the risk of violence against citizens increases. Remember Wounded Knee. Governments have frequently resorted to using foreign armies or recent immigrants against citizens. King George did this in the Revolutionary War, and Lincoln did this in the Civil War. Many countries have used this tactic throughout history. Moreover, the Army now accepts non-citizens into the Army and may even accept illegal aliens into the Army in the very near future. During the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, brother fought against brother. There is no guarantee that as the citizenry is disarmed and the federal government grows ever stronger and turbulent times arise, that the government won't use violence against us. All history argues for the opposite possibility. Believe me, in the future, if you hear that loud knock on the door in the middle of the night, it will not be Andy of Mayberry, but a total stranger who will say that he was just following orders. With your weapons confiscated, feel free to throw your pocket constitution at him. The Founding Fathers, living in a tiny and largely homogeneous nation, feared the power of the relatively weak federal government they had just created. They would be terrified of the many times larger, more distant, and more powerful federal government that runs every aspect of our lives today and seems to grow more powerful with each passing year. Those are my thoughts on strategy and tactics, and it is now time to hear what you think. Thank you.